What are the most important numbers to track in your business? If you don't know your numbers, you don't know your business. But it's not enough just to say that, because the truth is there are certain numbers that are the most important. And if you don't know those numbers, then you really don't know your business and you're really going to struggle. It's like a good way of thinking of it is like if you don't if you don't know your numbers in your business, the important ones, then it's like trying to walk through a room in the dark with no windows, with tacks on the floor and booby traps and all kinds of stuff, trying to get from one side of the room to the other. It's chaotic. Things come at you and surprise you, and not good surprises, bad surprises. um, and like checking your bank account is scary because you have no idea what you're going to be confronted with every day. That's not a fun way to live. Certainly not a fun way to run a business. And it makes you resent your business. And that's kind of like a warning sign. That's a warning sign that maybe you're doing something wrong when you start resenting your business as though it's like, your business's fault. It's like a person, you start resenting it. You start resenting it. You start thinking, if it wasn't for this stupid business, then, And so that's usually a warning sign that something is off, something is wrong. And I always, anytime I've had big issues, usually they're solvable. And by that I mean they're usually solvable by knowing the most important numbers in your business. So I'm going to go through those, and I'm just going to tell you what mine are. And you may agree with me, you may not, depending on how big of a school you are. I mean, it really just depends on your experiences and what you've done. If you're successful and you're doing great, then my hat's off to you. In some ways, this business is easy. It's easy to grow. It's easy, but on the other hand, it's a really hard business too to be truly successful in. And again, success. Like, what does that mean? Does that, for some people, that just means they have a lot of revenue, and it's like that's not what it means to me. If having a lot of revenue is successful, but I have to be working 24/7 and my phone's blowing up every single day with problems and fires I got to put out, like that's not successful. I don't care how much revenue you're paying me. That's not worth it to me. I don't want to live that way, right? so so revenue is great, but your business has to support your life, not the other way around. So, but anyway, speaking of revenue, top line revenue, gross revenue, that's one of the critical numbers you need to know, your gross revenue. And it's just kind of like an indicator as to where things are in your business. So, and one thing I will say about gross revenue, don't compare your revenue to last month. This is a really common problem. Like, don't say, oh, we're down from last month. That's the wrong thing to say. You want to compare your gross revenue to last year this month, right? That's more of a true comparison because it's a seasonal business. It's a seasonal business, right? So like there's months that you will have higher revenue every year. It's just the way it is because of the seasonality of the business. So don't compare your revenue to last month. Compare your revenue to last year this month. So gross revenue, that's number one. Number two is your drop rate. Your drop rate. So how many students dropped out of your school this last month? Like how many students was it? Okay. And what I would say in the industry in general, the average is between 7 and 10%. I mean, if you're at 10% drop rate each month, that means you're dropping 10% of your total student enrollment in a month. Then that's a problem. Uh, because think about that. In 10 months, you're at zero. Or in 10 months, you've had to completely, recycle all of those. And you might say, well, I'm at 10%, but I have students, I've had them for years. So it's like, well, that just means that you're getting new students in and then they're dropping really fast, like within a month or two or three. That just means you're churning through a lot of students. And that usually means that you have a very high marketing spend in order to maintain whatever level of students that you have. And so you got to be really careful with your drop rate. You should be tracking this. And again, don't compare last month, compare last year this month. And so your drop rate matters. You know, the industry's high. I think that drop rate's kind of high. We stay at 5% or below. That's where you need to be. If you're at 5% or below in your drop rate, you're doing the right thing and to keep your students. You're gonna drop students every month, especially when you get bigger. You're gonna drop students every month, but you need to control that number. It's a very important number to be tracking. So you got top line revenue, number one. Number two is, what is your drop rate? And then also too, with the drop rate, like if you have a higher number, then you should also be tracking, whether you have a higher number or not, you should also be tracking the drop rate per teacher, right? So like how many students dropped out of Johnny's studio, for example. So each teacher's studio, you should be tracking how many students they're dropping and holding them to this same standard. Like they need to be under 5% drop rate per month. And if they're not, then you need to have a system in place to move them along, help them improve that, or have them move on. So it's very, very important. Otherwise, you're going to, your drop rates will start to get out of control, and you'll be in that place, like I was saying, where you're just churning and burning, and nobody wants to be there. So drop rate's important. Very important number to track, not just for your school, but also for your teachers. Okay, how about payroll? Payroll that's your biggest number. We don't have inventory. We don't have inventory like, a retail store does where they're storing product and goods and all that. Our product is the lesson. And so our teacher pay and our admin staff pay is our largest number on the budget. And so this number really matters. Like, how much are you paying your teachers? It's super common to overpay teachers, by the way. It's super common. So just be mindful of that. Like, you shouldn't be overpaying your teachers. So then the question is, well, what should I be paying my teachers? As a percentage, it should be below 40% of gross revenue. Okay. Now, having said that, don't pay your teachers a percentage of gross revenue. Pay them a fixed rate, hourly rate, but it should be lower than 40% of gross revenue. That's a target. That's where you want to shoot for. And that number will scale up as your revenue goes up, because you're going to be paying them per student. So as you get more students, you're going to be paying higher, more to your teachers. But your admin staff, that's different. That's more of a fixed pay, a fixed expense. And that I would say, try to stay under 20%. But as your revenue goes up and up and up, then that number can go down. It should go down closer to 15, maybe even 12%. If you can get your admin staff percentage down, that's a really good thing. But your payroll is going to be, I'd say try to stay under 60% with your payroll. So that's a number that you want to be watching very closely, because it's the biggest number on your budget. Marketing spend is totally all over the place, because some people don't spend anything on marketing. And it's like, okay, well, if you can make that work and you got to, you can continue to grow your school and meet your numbers and, whatever, like, man, if you just put a little bit of gasoline on that fire, then imagine what could happen, but some people, just don't know how much to spend or where to spend it, which of course that's a whole nother conversation. But what is your marketing spend in your school, and how are you controlling that? I think it depends on the stage of your business. It depends on the stage that your business is in. So like if you're in a growth phase, an expansion phase, then that number is probably going to be closer to 12%. Maybe even a little higher. Depends on how aggressive you are. Depends on, what you're willing to do and how much capital you have. If you are in more of a stable place where you're just maintaining, then it's probably closer to 6 to 8%, depending again on how aggressive you are and what kinds of things that you're doing to bring new students in the door. So marketing spend, that's another really important one. Um, just remember this, as a general rule, the largest line item on your budget is the one that you want to watch the closest. Uh, it's frankly where you can save the most money too, by the way. The largest line item, and payroll, that's your largest line item. So if you can get your teacher pay down, one way you can do that is you can tier your teacher pay. Like you could start off maybe younger teachers at a lower rate, and then they can work their way up the longer they're with the company. So that's one way you can do it instead of starting everybody up, at a higher rate. I do think that teacher raises really need to be merit based, not just tenure based. So like if they're just with you for a long period of time, that's not necessarily a reason that you should give them a raise. Now maybe they've got great student retention. That is our big thing that we offer raises for is student retention. Like if you've got student retention, you're staying below 5%, you're golden. I'll give you a raise all day long. And then of course, how much is the raise going to be? Well, that's a good question too. It's not always the same because it's dependent on how close you're meeting that budget target, right? Like, are you staying below 40%? Well, if last year you were above 40%, then you can't give them a raise, right? Because you're over budget. But if you're below the budget, if you're like at 39, 38, 35, that's awesome. So like set the budget for yourself and determine, like where you landed the year before with that. And that'll determine, what you can do with raises. By the way, one thing I will say about raises too is, since we're on this topic, I used to do raises sporadically. Like I would have teachers come at me all the time, just be like, "Hey, I need a raise. Hey, I want a raise. Hey, I want a raise." Like I've been with you for so long. I've done this. And I realized it got kind of chaotic. It's like, man, I'm always meeting with teachers about raises. So I just decided, okay, we're just going to like funnel all of this and just do it once a year. So we're going to do annual reviews, which again, that's a whole nother conversation. You should have a system for it and a process and all of that. But that fixed it. Like now we don't have any requests anymore from our teachers.